This is Andrea Kolski, and you're listening to Justice is Blonde on Lone Star Community Radio. And today we're super excited to be joined by Rebecca Beavers. She's a private investigator, she's a soldier for women, and she is running a anti-trafficking alliance. So just what a wonderful guest. We're really happy to have you here today.
Hi, thank you so much. I appreciate it. That's wonderful to be here. Yes, so I just started Anti-Trafficking Alliance. It's going in and out, sorry. So I just started Anti-Trafficking Alliance. We're located in Heights, Houston. It's myself and another private investigator, and we work to recover victims of sex trafficking.
So what a noble and amazing cause to say, we're going to get our resources together and we're going to try to help. I mean, obviously it's mostly women, which is why I'm calling you a soldier for women, to try to recover these folks that end up in just the most dangerous, tragic, and sad lifestyles.
Right. And it's not just the marginalized anymore. We're seeing victims come out of, suburban America.
And so as far as human trafficking, this is definitely something that is a concern as a parent. I know you're a mom, but it's a concern just as a woman, just in life. What a terrible situation to find yourself where you are somebody else's property, essentially, and they can do what they please with you.
Yes, and unfortunately, it's not this idea that a woman is chained to the floor or locked in a room even anymore. We have this idea that it's happening in a third world country. No, it's actually happening here in our streets, and it's out in plain sight. And so with that, it's girls will get wrapped up with guys that they think love them, and these are the hardest cases. It takes the longest to help them, on the road of recovery because they were completely swindled, as I call it, or hoodwinked. But it's really Stockholm syndrome is what the real terminology is for it, because they believe this man loves them and they believe that, he's going to invest in their future and their life. And they're just very excited to, be with someone that they think loves them.
And so oftentimes what happens is, like, you have a young lady, she may have some self-esteem issues, or she may just be, like you said, blinded by the love, and she gets wrapped up with somebody, and that person in turn essentially prostitutes them out, maybe may video them or in other ways victimize or marginalize their existence. And they keep the power by taking control of the money, by, basically restricting their freedom. Like you said, they're not going to chain you to the floor, but they're going to do things that, from the victim standpoint, restrict what they perceive as abilities to leave the situation or leave the scenario. Am I right?
Absolutely. And, we do see situations where, the trafficker or the pimp will, really convince them that the law enforcement is not on their side. And that's just not true. Definitely not in Houston, Texas, because I have seen a vastly different perspective. There are law enforcement out there that care. And so when, for example, I have a situation with a case where she took a drug charge and their drugs were not hers. And so,
by she, you mean a defendant. So you have a defendant that ends up in this justice system.
Correct.
Basically because of their poor choices of boyfriends or associates or whatever the situation may be, right?
Right. And, at the end of the day, she still made that choice to go be with him. But is it really fair to say, okay, now you're in this situation, we don't want to help you? No, that's not fair. Because it could be anybody of us. We could have gotten with the wrong guy, and then now, we're in a sticky situation.
Right. Some people get with the wrong guy and they get divorced. But I often say that women end up in the criminal justice system often because of the men that they're in relationships with.
Right.
You don't really, and this is no disservice to women. I think women are amazing, and if we stuck together, we could take over the world.
Really.
I just think that it's a situation where, you have these criminal you have aggravated robberies, or you have criminal organizations, and typically the head of the operation and the organization is not a female. The women are more marginal players, or they're not kind of running the show. And like I said, it's not because I don't think we could, but it's just typically my experience is that women who end up in the justice system end up there because either of who they're in a relationship with or because of some addiction issue. Is that your experience?
I mean, absolutely. But so she took this charge, and it wasn't her drugs, and she took the charge. Well, then it put her in a bind, and then she had a warrant, and of course, he's not going to spend the money on the legal, side to get her,
the best representation.
Right, and get the warrant fixed. He wants to keep her under his thumb, and so by her having a warrant and believing that police is not on her side, she's going to stay, on the run and, under his control. And so that's what we see a lot of.
So I want to talk to you. I know you said that the Houston organization or the Houston law enforcement agencies are great, and they really do have in mind these young ladies. But you also have access to resources for folks that are trafficked, or whether it's counseling or medical issues.
Right. We have a doctor on our board, a primary care physician. Her name is Dr. Maria Gonzalez, and she's incredible. She really has a huge heart for the women. She actually goes on outreach to the cantinas and talks to the women. In that she's from Juarez, so she speaks fluent Spanish. And so we offer free medical care to our clients that come through our doors, and that we're aiding or assisting with other things. And then we also have 2 counselors on staff, licensed counselors that understand trauma, and then they also understand the diversity and dynamics of sex trafficking. So, in fact, one's a parent of a sex trafficked victim. So, I try to put together a team of people that really have a heart for this, this issue, this movement.
And certainly, it is when you hear human trafficking, you think, okay, maybe somebody was kidnapped or sold, or maybe even a child could have ended up in this situation. And I don't know how often recently you've been at the airport, but being at the Houston airport and at the Atlanta airport in the last week, I can tell you that there's lots of advertising that basically says we are against human trafficking. I mean, it's obvious that as a society we don't think that's a great idea. I mean, I think if we're as a society of right-thinking folks, nobody would say yes, human trafficking is great. Now, certainly, criminals that make their money in this enterprise would disagree. But it is something that I feel like is getting more publicity and coming more to the forefront, maybe than it has in the past lately.
Right, and that's great. I think that the new awareness movement is phenomenal. But we also have to address the issue of porn and the demand that it creates for sex trafficking. And there's major issues there, and that could be a whole segment right there. And there's organizations out there doing the research on this, scientific research.
And this is what we were talking about earlier, where it's like, okay, these people are not only possibly sold, but they are maybe, taken down a pornography road, whether they're making pornographic videos or taking pornographic images, and then, the people that traffic them are ultimately getting all kinds of money for the images, and oftentimes
Right.
the victim isn't getting anything.
Right, you have a product that you can sell over and over. It's not like drugs where you have to then, regain the product somehow. So it's very lucrative.
And that's something interesting that I think is what is a consistent problem in trafficking and in the sex industry. So first of all, there's a big demand for it.
Right.
Second of all, there's a product that if you're the pimp, that product is always available to make you money. So for example, if you sell somebody drugs, there's a known quantity, and once you sell it, you can't sell the same drugs again.
Right.
Same with weapons or other things that would be illegal that you would sell. When you're selling a person, that's like a revolving ATM where you're going to get access to that resource over and over and over again. And you find that the pimps or the folks that are promoting the prostitution have a huge desire not to give up their ATM machine.
Right. And also addressing the demand is, addressing consumerism. And, at the end of the day, we all have to take a good, long, hard look in the mirror and say, how are we, aiding in this awful situation? Are we buying into porn? Are we, not paying attention to our kids and what they're watching? Because it's just continuing a vicious cycle.
So we do need to take a break to hear from our sponsors, but when we come back, we'll continue to discuss human trafficking in Houston and Montgomery County and basically globally, and what we can do to prevent it, what we can do to be aware, and just to be socially conscious about it. You're listening to Justice is Blonde on Lone Star Community Radio.
Slow cooking pancakes from my boy, still up, still fresh as a daisy. Playing ping pong all night long, everything's on me.
Don't forget to download the Lone Star Community Radio app for your Google Play or Apple Store. Bring Montgomery County's community radio with you anywhere with your smartphone or tablet. If you are in the Conroe area, tune in on FM. That is Conroe's FM 104.5, 106.1.
This is Andrea Kolski, and you're listening to Justice is Blonde on Lone Star Community Radio, and we're super excited to be joined by beautiful brunette, no offense to the hair color, Rebecca Beavers, who is a advocate, soldier for women, also a private investigator, just doing a great job through life. So we're really happy to have you, Rebecca.
Thank you.
Driving
I'm
all the way
so
up.
glad to be here.
Driving all the way up. We call it North Houston, Conroe, Texas. Also, one of the fastest growing cities in the country, according to the Wall Street Journal. Did you know that little tidbit?
I did not. But by the way, on my driver's license, I am a platinum blonde.
Oh, excellent. That, you know what, for the listeners, we'll feel an extra sense of loyalty then.
They called me Gwen Stefani with that blonde hair. So
Well, we're really happy to have you. And if you're just joining us, we were talking before the break about human trafficking. And Rebecca has a really great heart, and she has started and is integral in a nonprofit based in Houston that deals with anti-trafficking. And I don't know a more worthy cause than trying to help young ladies, mostly young ladies, that end up in an industry where they are trafficked and forced either psychologically, physically, or through some other means to have sex with people for money, to put naked pictures of themselves up online for money. And when I say for money, it's oftentimes where the money does not end up in their pockets.
that's
So what a trying situation. And you're working with an organization known as the Anti-Trafficking Alliance.
yes.
And with that organization, there's resources for folks that think they're helpless or are stuck in a situation. So just wonderful, wonderful job you're
Thank
doing.
you. So Anti-Trafficking Alliance, ATA, formed just very recently, December of 2017. And our goal is to research, recover, and restoration. That while we are not aftercare, we just advocate for we align with aftercares that are out there that combat this problem as well, to help place victims, if they need home.
Well, I think that's really important that you come into the contact with the victims, but oftentimes you come into the contact with the victims when they end up in the criminal justice system. Isn't that right?
That's correct.
So what a hard issue where you're forced to do this against your will. And ultimately what happens is you end up in the justice system because one of the people that you are set up with or that you are prostituting yourself to is a police officer.
Correct.
And that's oftentimes how you or I would come into contact with somebody in this industry.
That's right.
So they get charged with either prostitution or promotion of prostitution or whatever's happening there. And at least in Houston, there are some resources available to those young ladies.
Absolutely. There's people in the system as well, in the district attorney's office, both here in Montgomery County and in Harris County, that care and that want to help them. So it's there. It's just sometimes it's a little hard to spot the signs. And I know how I'm sure it goes. It's very overwhelming when you have a ton of cases, and it's hard to see all the details. But it's very helpful if you have people who are paying attention and helping you notice that, hey, this girl, she's actually a victim, and she needs to be she needs to be seen. She needs help.
And so what'll happen, like at least as the defense attorney, when I go in on a case that is a young lady that's charged with prostitution or something that's similar, and I'm talking about the girls that I have represented. But what happens in my situation is oftentimes the prosecutor will want to know who hired you, because you do have a situation where the pimps or the folks that are controlling these women control the money. And I think that there is when they realize that I'm hired by the victim or, not hired by the pimp, that makes them feel more comfortable about maybe meeting with the victim to potentially give information or talk about what they can do or want to do to maybe change their life rather than just incarcerate them.
Right, and I'm glad that they asked that question. I didn't know. That's amazing. I work with another attorney who actually introduced us, George Roll, and he's an incredible criminal defense attorney in Harris County.
And he also knows everybody. For those that don't know George knows everybody.
Oh, he's phenomenal. He's a big teddy bear, and he has a big heart to help these women.
And by everybody, I mean everybody famous. So you can't have a conversation with George that lasts more than 5 minutes without an experience where he's
anyway,
related to it.
so he's helped me with several cases. I mean, he has been really incredible in facilitating justice for the victims.
And George, I don't think he would mind me saying this. He's a father to 3 daughters, so it certainly really would hit home for him. Just what a terrible, you're a mother too, and as am I, and just mothers of daughters. It's the worst possible conceivable situation would be that something would happen to your little angel people.
I know, and that's why I keep fighting, because this is hard stuff, and I wake up in the morning at 6 a.m. when the alarm goes off, and I really just want to turn it off and go back to bed and make myself some breakfast and a mimosa.
Especially today when the rain is coming down, and I can totally relate. But you have a higher calling, and you really you get out of bed for a good reason and you go to bed and you can realize that you really impacted people's lives.
I started doing this in 2003. I was 17 at the time.
And when you said you started doing this, you advocating.
Recoveries. No,
Yes.
the advocating part and even the self-awareness of what the issue was at hand, I didn't have a full grasp on that picture. That took years for me to come to, terms with some things that have happened to me in my life. But I'd have friends that would call me and they, got pimps and they didn't realize that, oh, you know, this is really what the grim reality is. And, oh, he just raped me and, beat me and took my $1,000 I made at the club. And would you please come get me? So I started doing these in 2003. And, I would say, okay, 1 a.m., I'll be there. You can bring one bag and, no
Drugs.
no, well, back then, I was a wild child, so but just be ready on the corner and we'll go. But that's that, and no drama.
So from your situation where you feel like you had this unique aspect where maybe you had access to this group of girls that trusted you and that would know that you would maybe just be a super friend or help them get
Come
out
through,
of
right.
dangerous
It's scary.
situations. So with your situation, you kept that moving forward in your life. Before the break, you were talking about, this isn't just a situation where, you have people that are here illegally and they come in and they're, working at the nail salon, and we have to get to that. And by the nail salon, I really mean like a massage parlor or things like that, where those folks are held against their will, or you have people that are here illegally and they're tricked into coming here where they say, okay, we're going to hold your passports if you don't do. We're talking about you're working with folks. Not that we don't advocate for those folks too. It's a kidnapping situation and a forced, essentially sex slavery. But you have dealt even more locally with folks that are affluent, maybe not in here illegally. They're here lawfully, and you've seen situations where those folks have gotten themselves trafficked or
Right,
essentially.
suburbia America, really, right? So, and in those situations, I had 2 cases last year with teenagers. One was 13 and one was 15, and they actually both went to the same school, and they didn't know each other. But the common denominator was that they both had gone to a party with some kids from school, and not also from the school that were there, and they were drugged and they were gang raped, and it was filmed, and it was circulated. And it just tore both of these girls down and destroyed their self-esteem and sense of self-worth and value. And so, when they get to that point, if they're not intercepted by a counselor and a loving support system, it just gets sideways really quick, and they begin to run away, and they begin to hide, and they,
Have
post.
self-esteem and self-loathing issues.
Right. And so, and with the social media age, and it's kind of gotten out of control, in my opinion. Kids are just posting anything now, and I could go on, Snapchat right now and show you, kids that are posting themselves nude. It's kind of crazy, and and trying to work with the parents and get the parents, kind of to recognize the signs and what's going on, is a battle in and of itself.
Well, I think that's really interesting that you say that because, there has been definitely a iPhone and social media revolution where everybody's taking selfies and posting things and need to, keep you posted of their every move. And as parents, you don't always know necessarily the technology to even track your kids. With Snapchat, your children often know more than you do about how to get on the Snapchat and how long the messages stay up and how to recover Snap messages. So, that's another thing is it's not just keeping an eye on your kids. It's like trying to stay informed with the technology so you know how to keep an eye on your kids.
Right. And if there's one thing I can impart today, if any parents are listening, it would be that if your child has a Facebook or Snapchat or Instagram, they're all the same companies. It's the same companies. Facebook that owns Instagram. I'm not sure about Snapchat, but the law that they have.
Snapchat is actually separate and it trades on the NASDAQ as Snap.
Wow. Okay. That's interesting. But with Facebook and Instagram specifically, their I guess guidelines or law of Facebook land is that if your child is 13 or over, they're allowed to have an account. Okay, that's their guideline. And if you don't have the password, then you better get a subpoena. They are not going to help you.
Well, I do. This is really interesting, and I know that the listeners are going to want to hear more about what they can do to protect themselves, their kids, and what parties not to send your kids to, what kind of good warnings you can give your kids, mostly your girls, but certainly it does exist for the fellas as well. But we do need to take a break to hear from our sponsors. But when we come back, we'll keep talking about, trafficking in Texas and what we can do to prevent it personally and, globally and here on a statewide level. You're listening to Justice is Blonde.
Still fresh as a daisy. Playing ping pong all night long. Everything's on neon and hazy. Chanel this, Chanel that. Hell yeah, on my good.
Hey guys, this is Connor.
This is Dick.
This is Chris.
And we're with the Ticket Stub Podcast every Thursday live at noon on 104.5 and 106.1 FM in the Conroe area. Also, anytime at irlonestar.com. You go to irlonestar.com/TTS. You can find all of our social media.
And don't forget, we give away 2 tickets to the Grand Theater on every show.
If you like movies and you like complaining or celebrating anything that has to do with the silver screen, check out the Ticket Stub Podcast and join us every Thursday at noon o'clock on Lone Star Community Radio.
Fresh as a daisy. Playing ping pong.
This is Andrea Kolski, and you're listening to Justice is Blonde on Lone Star Community Radio. And today is February the 7th, 2018, and it's raining in Conroe. But we're joined with sunshiny, beautiful, all-star guest, Rebecca Beavers. She is a private eye. She has her own To Catch a Predator operation, organization, and just wonderful, wonderful to have her here today. We're really excited to have you.
Thanks.
So,
I wouldn't call it too much of a To Catch a Predator.
well,
but-
I would, Rebecca. I want to talk about how you yourself personally, you do work and help run the Anti-Trafficking Alliance based in Houston, but you yourself have been integral in the recovery of young ladies who were trafficked.
That's correct.
So to me, To Catch a Predator, you caught the people before they were put, or maybe even after they were in the network. But pimps that Jake, our producer today, and I don't know, right?
Right. So, I make a joke. I call it my Pimpadex. But, there's a lot of them. And keeping an eye on, which ones are there and what rings. And there are actually quite a few rings in Harris County. And so
Prostitution rings you're talking
prostitution rings, that's correct. And so we do see a mixture of minors and adults even in these rings that are being sold for sex.
And so if you're a pimp, you're in a situation where if you're caught, you can be charged with a more serious offense than, if you're the victim, which would be a misdemeanor, you might get charged with prostitution. But if you're actually engaged in the process of trying to prostitute folks, you can be charged with the felony of promoting prostitution.
That's correct.
And so certainly we want to get those people off the streets and get them, kind of, if there's no market for it, and if the folks running the show aren't there, certainly you're making every effort to shut down the industry.
Absolutely. And we also do like to aid law enforcement in netting consumers. We've worked on a few different operations with them, with spas and with apartments and hotels.
So when you say netting consumers, like you set it up from a law enforcement aspect to try to get the pimps, or is it to get the Johns, or?
To get it's Johns or consumers, but yes, to get consumers as well. And then, if the pimp is around, they're able to, I forget what the charge is, but they're able to basically, I don't know if it's ticketing or what, but they can get the pimps if the pimps drive them.
So it may just be that they're guilty as a party.
Right.
Under the law of parties, if you aid, abet, assist, attempt to aid, abet, assist anybody in the commission of the offense, you can be charged as a party, even if you didn't commit the act. That's why if somebody goes to the Jack in the Box and there's an aggravated robbery that goes on inside, the getaway driver can be charged with aggravated robbery, even though they're the getaway driver. So ultimately, those are the folks that you do want punished, rather than the young ladies who are, most of them, even if they think they're doing it by choice, it's probably just a psychological issue. I mean, I think to be a good pimp, you have to be almost a good psychologist to be able to manipulate people.
Oh, absolutely. A psychologist without a degree.
A psychologist without a degree.
They actually have books out written on how to the game, on how to do what they do.
How to win friends and manipulate people.
Correct. I should probably read them. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, I mean, it definitely exists, and they're broken people too. Now, I don't have much mercy for them. Period.
I agree.
There's groups out there that do. Not many of them, but I always kind of wonder, what does it take for a man to want to control a woman in that way. To me, it's crazy. There's just no amount of money that I would ever, could ever accept to,
Terrorize someone.
yeah, absolutely. I just, that lifestyle, I just, it's so foreign to me. I mean, I know a bit about it. I've studied it, just per surveillance and, but I just don't really get it. I mean, something has obviously clearly happened to these guys at some point in their life where they just, I don't know if it's that they hate women or what, but I mean, you know,
Well, I was involved in defending, you had talked about how you had come into contact with a 13-year-old and a 15-year-old who basically were drugged and raped at a party, and it was videoed and then passed around. And so the number of crimes that happened with that situation, obviously every one of those cases is a sexual assault of a child or an aggravated sexual assault of a child in the case of the 13-year-old. But then you're going to create child pornography, you're going to disseminate it, then you're promoting child pornography. There's just a number of layers and dynamics of those issues.
no one was prosecuted on either of those cases or even charged.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense to me. But certainly I was a prosecutor in Harris County, and I would have been excited. I worked in the child abuse division to help and prosecute the folks that did that to those young ladies.
Yeah, it's really crazy. And so a lot of times,
So you can see why those girls would think law enforcement's not on our side.
right,
You know?
absolutely. And a lot of times, they just need a little help guiding through the judicial maze that is there. There's no, I mean, for someone who's like yourself who's gone to school and has so much experience doing, this kind of work on the judicial level, that you understand the situation. You would immediately know if somebody called and said, "Here's my situation." You would know how to advise them, like, "Okay, here's what you do next," or "Here's what I advise you to do." So, a lot of our, clients or parents that call in to ATA, we're, just letting them know, like, "Hey, we're here for you," being supportive and helping them go through that maze.
Well, one of the things we were talking about before the break was the situation where there's social media and access to kind of seeing what your kids are up to. So I definitely think as a parent, you want to be able to either track the Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook. You got to know the passwords. You got to keep up with it on a daily basis.
Absolutely.
Where and you know where your kids are. So I think a lot of parents have the Find a Friend app or Find Your iPhone app. And I will say that, as if you have a situation where your child's phone is turned off or you can't find them and it's a neutral situation, you let them know how serious it is and that they won't have a phone or take away their privileges in the event that they turn that feature off, because it ultimately, in a case that I was involved in, was integral in locating a 16-year-old. So essentially it was, she had met with somebody where they talked about modeling, and so it starts out with this modeling angle, and then, maybe you can do some dancing, and then maybe there was some stripping that was suggested, and then all of a sudden she's being advertised on Backpage, and her father ultimately found her due to his phone locator, and he was assaulted by the pimp. He was held at gunpoint, but ultimately he did retrieve his daughter and her friend, and it was at the point where she was going to be put in the industry. She was, there was a John that was there, and
Yeah, it sounds like the pimp had a very planned and methodical grooming process. So see, he started with, "Oh, let me take pictures of you. You would make a great model."
right, you're so beautiful.
And of course, all I think majority of women, of course, that's wonderful. To have a guy that you like or you think loves you, tells you how beautiful you are and wants to take photos of you, right? So it starts with that, build her self-esteem up, and then just keep pushing the bar, keep pushing the boundary, and pushing the envelope to get her to do more and more and more, and get her onto drugs and alcohol, and then you just start the breaking process.
Right, and that certainly is something that we see, which is one of the ways we get into contact with these victims, is that you do have somebody that develops an addiction to whatever drug it is that helps them numb their experiences or forget about their experiences, and then they get pulled over on traffic or whatever issue causes them to come into contact with law enforcement. And that's how we find out, okay, these are the behind-the-scenes, deeper issues.
Right, and it really is like an onion. And not to be so cliche, but it's true. I mean, once you start peeling out off the outer layer, then you start really seeing these other issues at hand and seeing that, she's not really there because she wants to be. It may appear, but even on a social media level, right? You'll see
Right.
people with their selfies and their, posting their dinners and stuff. But when you start peeling back and looking at their life actually day to day behind closed doors, you realize they're under lock and key. He doesn't just let them go wherever they want to go or do whatever they want to do. They don't have a bank account or a credit card or a car. And in some situations they do. But he completely takes over, and then they just get in so deep, and they think that there's just no other way out or no help, and so they just accept it and say, "Oh, I want to be here." But
And I've had candid conversations with a client who, when given resources through Harris County, they do have a special court and a group of prosecutors there, and just folks that have a heart and they want to hear about your experience and they want to know how they can help. But she was of the mentality like, I like doing this. I'm going to keep doing it. I don't have any desire to get out of the industry. I do want to stop getting caught because that is problematic when I have to keep coming to court. But I mean, she was adamant, like, I like doing this. So as somebody that hears that, that's an outsider, what is your take if you have a young lady that says, no, I'm a prostitute by choice and this is, I love it, I have a great life? How do you feel about that?
well, if I made $150,000 a year, I would be pretty happy too. I work in the nonprofit sector, so I don't make
Right.
a lot of money. But with that being said, there's addictions to lifestyle. I mean, there's an AA group for shoppers and spenders, aholics, SA, that exists. So there's that aspect of lifestyle addiction. So I don't, I'd never met her, but if I met her, I'm sure there's more to it.
And she was trafficked, which started it all. She was kidnapped basically she used to live in Las Vegas. She was taken to California, and she had the textbook worst case scenario where she was kept in a hotel room. They took all her stuff and just forced to basically have sex for X amount of time with whoever they brought in. And it was just kind of the typical nightmare. What you would conceive as your worst nightmare is what this young lady lived through. So to come out of that, where she was forced to do this, and all of a sudden say, no, I like to do it, it's maybe she's convinced herself that that's the case, but I don't necessarily believe her.
It's tough. I think that so she's had something very traumatic and awful happen to her. And we do know the violence rates against the women that are working are very high. They experience some form of violence against them, whether they're choked or hit or hair pulled or, violent sex. I mean, that is they get abused. I know dancers who will tell me, I walked into this club and thought I could work here and thought, I'll be safe. There's security. But then got assaulted, and the club says, no, we're not calling the police, and you're going to finish your shift. So, I think there's just a lot of misconceptions, and sometimes, it's hard to have a super change in your life to go with a different career and think, I
Right.
can do this.
Maybe they don't have a high school education or any, what
Right.
they perceive as additional skill.
And I mean, at the bottom line, at the end of the day, when it comes to, I don't know what her lifestyle's like or if she has children, but, I mean, there's always a way, right? But in their mind, if they're desperate and their children need to eat or they're about to be evicted, they're going to do whatever they have to do. And I think we all would for our kids. Obviously not to that extreme just because, we have a support system, but maybe they don't.
Right.
And
I
they
mean, I do
usually
think
don't.
as women who are moms, or just, again, I'm just going to throw this out there because I think women could take over the world if we would just stick together. I think women can always find a way if they have enough self-awareness and
Yeah,
self-love.
and knowing what's out there and being, educated on and empowered.
But we do need to take a break to hear from our sponsors one final time. You're listening to Justice is Blonde on February 7th at Lone Star Community Radio.
Sipping on rosé, silver lake, sun coming up all lazy. Slow cooking pancakes from my boy, still up, still fresh as a daisy.
For those of you who like your partners, your gumbo, and your music salty, well, we're here to help with the music. Julian Shea here, host of Lone Star Country Nights Thursday, your weekly dose of roots and Americana and all the music that makes this part of the country special. We stir in Western swing, honky-tonk, Zydeco, Texas blues, outlaw country, and put a pinch of red dirt, and then we smoke it over a slow fire. Then listen to the results Thursday nights on Conroe's 104.5 and 106.1 and worldwide at irlonestar.com.
This is Andrea Kolski, and you're listening to Justice is Blonde on Lone Star Community Radio. And if you're just joining us, you've missed a great show so far. We've been joined by super special guest, beautiful young lady, Rebecca Beavers. I like to call her a soldier for women because that's what she does. She steps up and helps and donates all her time, resources, and energy into helping women who are victims of trafficking. And she's integral and a director over at the Anti-Trafficking Alliance in Houston.
Yes, we're located in the Heights, Houston.
Do you want to tell the folks how they can reach out to you, get to know you, get to meet you?
Absolutely. I'd love to. Our website is atahtx.org.
And if folks have questions, they can shoot you an email and you're available.
Yes.
Do you have a telephone number where they could call you if it's a situation where they feel they can't maybe send an email or there'll be a trail?
Sure, 713-712-6612. We also have an investigations tab on our website. And if you have a missing person, adult or child, there's 2 separate forms. You can fill it out, and we'll get back with you if we can take on the case.
And so if you're just joining us, Rebecca's been telling us, basically, hey, trafficking isn't just something that happens in other countries. You got to open your eyes. It happens here in suburban, urban America, right next door. It could be something that happens to your child when they go to a party. It could be something that happens if your daughter gets involved with the wrong boyfriend and, they're able to psychologically manipulate that person. And it really is something that we've got to open our eyes to as community members, as moms, as parents, and just put an end to this business.
Absolutely. In January, my co-investigator and I, we had several cases, 7 actually to be exact, and missing persons and situations where we helped in the legal system, helped pull strings. And then we had also 3 pimps, traffickers that we helped put behind bars.
And that's really rewarding to know, you're doing your part every little bit at a time to eliminate the supply and demand. The demand may be there for sex forever, but, to cut off the supply and to help people get out of the industry, that's really, really important. And they're lucky to have somebody so passionate working for their organization and operation.
Thank you. We're lucky that we know some really great law enforcement personnel that welcome our tips and our information. And we really try to research and do as much as possible to take the load off of their hands, because there's just so much. I can't even imagine being a police officer and what they have to go through in their caseload. It's just a lot. And so we just try to, aid in any way we can to, make it more efficient or just smoother,
So I did want to talk, we haven't covered this much in this show. I did want to talk about, there is a surge of arrests that we see as criminal defense attorneys where you're having massage parlors get busted, or you have places that are set up to look as some other type of operation where you end up having a bunch of women that are being forced, from a status perspective. And locally here, there was a big bust at an Asian massage parlor where a number of people were arrested, and it was indicated that those ladies were, their passports were held, or they were kind of forced to work in this industry. And
document servitude is a very real thing. And they come here indebted to the people who bring them here, whether it's from Asia or whether it's from South America or Central America.
And so you have these folks that are essentially their freedom and their liberty is being held by somebody else, or they don't have any money, or they don't have a phone, or their relatives are threatened. Have you seen that?
Absolutely, we've seen quite a bit of it. And when you think, I'm so far from home, I don't know anybody here, I have no papers, and I'm afraid of law enforcement. It's very hard to get a victim outcry in a situation like that.
Well, especially when you're dealing with folks that are here illegally, they have an irrational fear that, hey, if I go to law enforcement about my situation, they're going to deport me, and maybe those circumstances are worse than the circumstances I'm in right now.
And you know what? There's actually a federal law. It's the TVAP. I'm going to butcher it. I apologize. You might know more about it. I have some information here. But it's a federal law that if you're a victim of trafficking, you've been brought over a border, it actually will, it spells out in there that it will help you with your citizenship status.
So, and I know it's similar to a political asylum situation where if you're, similar in that you actually have a greater chance of getting status if you're here illegally, if you have an asylum situation, or if you're a trafficked victim, or if
Correct.
you're a victim in general of a crime since you've been here. I am familiar with that. So for victims to know, hey, if I outcry and I'm here illegally, it may actually help me with my status as long as I'm actually a victim and I'm not using it as a false way to manipulate my reason
It's
to be
the
here.
TVPA, Trafficking Victims Protection Act.
So it's, if anybody's listening who has that fear, just realize, hey, not only can they reach out to Rebecca, but if you reach out to law enforcement, they'll try to help you, as long as you just get out of the situation that you're in.
Help them help you.
Help them help you. And there are a lot of grants, federal grants, to some of these local agencies. I know that Montgomery County was given some extra resources to try to help traffic victims. I know that Harris County takes that very seriously. And so that's Houston, and we're Conroe here, North Houston. So don't think that they don't want to help you, because they need to use the resources that they have available in order to justify their program. And
Right.
certainly there is a need for it.
Right, and Houston and Montgomery, Harris County, Montgomery County, I feel they're doing a wonderful job in really trying to combat this, and I hope it serves as a wake up call, or I mean, what's the better word? As a training, ground of, hey, we're doing this and this works, so replicate it in your city.
And I do think at least there is a push in Montgomery County to punish the consumer. As you said, you don't call them the Johns, the consumer, versus punishing the victim. And that wasn't always the case. I mean, I will say that there is enhanced prostitution laws where if you have multiple convictions for prostitution, if you get up to 4, if you're a 4th offender prostitute, you can be punished as a state jail felon. And then if you get 2 state jail felonies, then you can be forced to go to prison. So to have to go to prison when you are doing something where you are the victim, regardless of what you believe about the system, regardless if you think they're doing it on their own, or regardless if you think you're in a situation where you're criminalizing and you're institutionalizing somebody that is a victim, any way you look at it.
Right, they need help, not
They need help.
a sentence.
They don't need to go to jail, the state jail, prison. It's not a solution. And so you don't want to have prosecutors that say, okay, well, you're not going to take my resources. Well, I'm going to give you 90 days in jail. I mean, that certainly doesn't give them a lot of support and love and comfort from the law enforcement side.
Right.
And that was ultimately what I experienced in Harris County. Was I had somebody that had a number of prostitutions historically throughout the country. And, she didn't want to work the program or use the resources. And ultimately we did have a couple good legal issues, and her cases were dismissed. She had 1 felony, having a firearm. I don't believe it was hers. I believe it was her pimp's or somebody else's. But then she had a case with the prostitution, and just recognizing, okay, yes, I could send her to jail, but the good of society is not better served
No,
by her
absolutely not.
going to jail,
Right.
when she basically met up with a cop who was, looking for her.
Right.
So it's been great having you, Rebecca. We need to say goodbye on
Thank
this
you.
rainy February 7th, but we hope that you keep doing the wonderful, good work that you're doing, and hope that people realize that you're somebody, that you're there for them. They can reach out to you. Tell them your website again.
It's atahtx.org, and my email is Rebecca, REBECCA, @atahtx.org.
And Rebecca's also not just running the show at this operation, but she's also a licensed private investigator. She can help you find lost people. She can help you interview and investigate people. And she's got a real knack at talking, as you can hear from the show. So she'll be a great witness if you ever need her to testify for you.
Absolutely.
So you're listening to Justice is Blonde, Soldier for Women Day. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Lone Star Community Radio.
Now we're talking astrology, getting our nails did all Japanese. Day drinking at the Wildcat, sucking real bad at Mariah Carey.